As many of you know, several years ago, Baltimore Presbytery went through a revisioning process. One of the outcomes of that process was that we divided the presbytery into 6 ministry groups of churches that were encouraged to collaborate together and to work together in their communities. You probably know what's happening in your own ministry group, but we thought you'd like to see some of the exciting things that God is doing in ministry groups across our presbytery. Take a look at some of the things that are happening.
The Bay Area Disciples has been working to support Comunidad Presbiteriana La Trinidad, which is a new worshiping community in Anne Arundel County. It supports Hispanic families and persons in Glen Burnie and Annapolis. We're celebrating 2 years of ministry. The community has begun a garden project, which has been very successful. Also, they have been worshiping at the community gardens throughout the summer. Several churches of our Bay Area Disciples cluster have been heavily involved in an effort to organize an IAF affiliate in Anne Arundel County. The Bay Area Disciples also held a stewardship workshop for the churches of our cluster, trying to enable our elders and leaders of our church in faithful stewardship.
The highlight of our year so far has probably been an event that we had on being a relational church. It was a very well-attended event, and it was exciting. And for me, probably the thing that was most interesting about that was it began because we wrote grants for 3 of our active members in the ministry group to be able to attend a training on relational church. And then they came back from that event and were able to help train all of us and infuse some of their energy and excitement into a gathering that we were having, and we had great fellowship and also got a little bit of a fire lit about what it is to be a relational church and to work together with one another. We've found that in addition to the couple of workshops we try to offer every year, probably the things that are the most well received by our folks are the events that are geared more towards fellowship and support of one another. And so we gather together, usually over food, of course, but we gather together and share ideas, we share concerns, we share support, and we try to uplift one another in our mutual ministries and in our individual ministries.
I represent the Susquehanna Ministry Group. Last year we developed a program, or the focus of that year was on environmental ministry. We shared information with our churches on how to become an Earth Care congregation. This year our focus was on using the resources from the Parish Resource Center. The Parish Resource Center is a ministry which is located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they work with churches in all kinds of different programs. And we invited them to come this year and speak to our churches about the best way for us to grow our individual church ministries. They would come in and do an assessment. They would invite representatives from each churches. The churches would meet with members of the Parish Resource Center, who then would confer with them and say, where are the areas where you sense a need to grow in your churches? And the PRC would speak to them and give them some ideas. So our grant this year is a response to what the Parish Resource Center had said to each of our individual churches about where we could grow and what we could do to strengthen our ministries. More than likely, much of that money is going to be spent sending youth from our churches to the National Presbyterian Youth Triennium, and most of that is directed toward how they can become more faithful disciples. But I don't want to leave the impression, though, that it's only an inward look. We're hoping that being faithful to Christ means, of course, looking at yourself in your own spiritual walk. But inevitably, if we're going to be faithful, we have to then turn our eyes out into how we can manifest that faith where we live. Every time we have a grant proposal, every time our congregation meets, part of what we discuss is how does this matter to the communities where we live? That's an essential part of our vision.
The Uptown Metro Ministry Group, that's different than any other ministry group, is that we put all of our resources together and fund at 3/4 of time a community builder through Strong City, Baltimore, who works specifically with the Woodburn-McCabe neighborhood in Baltimore City. What he does is works with that community, Woodburn-McCabe, as well as several other neighborhoods up and down the York Road corridor, to assist them in organizing themselves, strengthening the work that they're doing to make stronger communities, safety issues around the neighborhood. But the big thing the community builder does above all of that is that all of our churches are invited to participate in a 3-week summer camp for the children of the McCabe neighborhood. So 2 churches partner each week for 3 weeks and put on this summer camp. The newest thing we're doing is we have a grant from the Chesapeake Bay Trust to have a full-time Conservation Corps intern who will serve all 12 of our churches. And he will go to each church on a Sunday morning and introduce himself and talk about ways that he can support the congregation to be better environmental stewards, to be better stewards of God's creation. One of the things we realized is when the Presbytery created the structure and gave us this nice funding every year and told us, use this money for whatever you think would be the best support for your churches. We looked at that and we said, we think the best thing that we can do with this is give this money away. I say the last thing that we do is we have a monthly pastor's lunch where all the pastors come together and just support one another. They do some planning about the ministry group, but they also just share what's going on in their churches and their congregations and how they can support one another to either in their personal life or their professional life to be the best pastor they can be to their congregation.
In the Loop Ministry is one of 6 ministry groups within the Baltimore Presbytery. Our mission is really to build stronger relationships within our congregations and in our presbytery. And we try to use our collective resources to retool, retrain ourselves and our congregations and how to do more effective community outreach in our prospective communities. We do have a strategy. Our strategy focuses on 4 areas. 1, we wanted to continue the themes of racism, injustice, and poverty. So we want to continue to have what we call safe space or courageous space, conversation dialogues. 2, we just didn't want to talk though. We wanted to actually take action in some of our communities. 3, we wanted to continue to have a focus on racism and injustice and poverty. And finally, number 4, we wanted to do all we could to support any positive change in our presbytery. January on MLK Day, we started our anti-violence awareness campaign, and we had a workshop on violence following the year with 323 murders in Baltimore City. And we used First and Franklin's Purple Ribbon Initiative, and we had ribbons for all 323 deaths that occurred in Baltimore. We had a discussion during the Lenten season. We brought all 4 of our African American churches together in a Lenten series discussion and Bible study. And we invited the whole presbytery to participate in the conversation. And it was around the book by Reverend Dr. James Cone, who is now deceased. And he wrote a book called The Cross and the Lynching Tree. We invited the whole presbytery to come and have that dialogue that tried to highlight some of the historical effects of lynching in our country and how that related to Jesus' crucifixion on the cross. So those are some of the things we've done this year, but I would like to say the Loop Ministry has also had a tremendous impact on the Baltimore Presbytery's new initiative on dismantling racism that mandates that all staff, clergy, have to take a training every 3 years to re-equip them to take some of these conversations, discussions back into their prospective ministries. Our next project We're looking to collaborate with BUILD, which is Baltimore United in Leadership Development, which advocates all over Baltimore City for communities. And we want to collaborate with them to do a series of trainings for our congregations, teach them how to do one-on-ones and do more effective ministry in our community.
We are a collection of 9 different churches serving in 8 different cities in the Wild Wild West Ministry Group. Because of this diversity, we decided this year to share our mission ministry money equally among each of us to see what God was going to do. 3 of our churches have focused on Christian formation and leadership development. Cumberland is calling in a special speaker for their session retreat. St. Andrews is calling in evangelism speaker for their youth ministry. And Covenant is putting in a peace pole in a garden, a prayer garden that they're developing. They also hope to plan and work with the center to build a labyrinth on their property. Several of our other churches are working with food, and as one of our ministers said, all our ministry happens in the kitchen. These churches, Barraville, Emmitsburg, and the Presbyterian Church in Hagerstown, work on food pantries, soup kitchens, and also Micah's Backpack, which is a program to distribute food to children on the weekends. Hancock is involved in Martha's Table, which is a brand new ministry where the churches got together in the community and decided we need to do something for homeless families. So they're establishing a shelter which provides food and clothing, activities for children, and also educational opportunities for the adults. So we're excited to be on the ground floor of that new ministry. 2 of our other churches are working on prophetic witness and actions of reconciliation. Frederick is working on a music ministry where they are getting people together to build awareness of issues around racism having to do with music. So these are just some of the things that are happening, and I would just ask you to pray for us as we reach out in all our different communities with these ideas with God's love and grace. What's going to happen in 2019? Well, only God knows that. But we do know that whatever happens, it will be a challenge and it will stretch our faith.